Wade Hartwell rode alone under a blistering New Mexico sun. He carried nothing but a canvas roll, a weathered hat, and the deed clutched in his calloused hand, a legal document declaring he owned 160 acres of dust, scrub, and dreams. The bank had sold it for exactly $1. Deserted for years, the teller had said. Yours to tame. But as the house came into view, Wade's stomach turned. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. 3 horses, 2 chestnuts, and a black mare stood tied at the fence. Fresh laundry flapped on a line stretched between 2 oaks. This wasn't an abandoned homestead. It was alive. He reined in slowly, eyes scanning every detail. The garden beside the porch was green and thriving. A coop full of chickens clucked contentedly. Tire tracks, new, cut the dirt path ahead. The screen door creaked open before Wade could dismount. A woman stepped out, tall, dark-haired, arms crossed tight. She didn't look startled. She looked ready. 2 more women appeared behind her, one red-haired with a sharp gaze, the other younger, blonde, eyes wary. "You're on private property," the first woman called out, voice clear and commanding. Wade raised the deed slowly. "Ma'am, there's been a mix-up. I bought this land fair and square 3 days ago. Got the papers right here." The woman didn't move. "Is that so?" She stepped forward, her sisters flanking her like sentries. "I'm Josie Monroe. This land's been in my family for 24 years, Wade blinked. "But the bank said it was abandoned over a decade ago. Said the owners disappeared." Josie stopped 10 feet from his horse, her eyes, green and blazing, locked onto his. They lied. Wade stayed in the saddle, unsure if stepping down would make him more of a threat, or more of a target. The red-haired woman had her hand near something at her belt. The blonde hovered close behind Josie, eyes flicking between Wade and the barn. "I checked the deed twice," Wade said, his voice steady. "Courthouse signed and stamped. Property line marked clear. Frontier Bank sold it to me outright." Josie's jaw tensed. "The bank's been trying to steal this land for years. First they claimed we owed taxes. Then they claimed we moved. Now I guess they're selling it to strangers with deep pockets and shallow questions." Wade's lips thinned. "I paid $500 cash. All I had." "Then you were robbed," the redhead said. Her voice was flint and fire. "Just like us." The blonde stepped closer, whispering something to Josie. Josie gave a slight nod, then faced Wade again. "We've got papers too," she said, pulling a folded sheet from her pocket. She held it high, aged parchment, the corners soft and frayed. "This is the original deed, signed over to our father, Thomas Monroe, in 1851. That makes it older than anything your bank sold you." Wade's breath caught. He could see the territorial seal, faded but real. The date stared back at him like a slap. "That can't be," he muttered. "The bank said—" "They say a lot of things," Josie interrupted coldly. "But they didn't say they told another family the owners died in a fire." Wade's brow furrowed. "What family?" "Folks from back east," Josie said. "Came 2 weeks ago with papers like yours. We sent them packing, but they were told we were dead, burned alive, all 3 of us." Wade looked from one sister to the next. Alive, standing, furious. Wade dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. His gaze flicked between the sisters, his mind reeling. "They told buyers you were dead?" he asked, voice low. Josie nodded grimly. "Not just us," said the fire took the house. 3 sisters burned in their beds. "You believe that?" "I don't know what I believe," Wade admitted, staring at the papers in his hand like they might catch fire themselves. "But I do know this deed is worthless if you're still alive and hold the original." "We are." "And we do," said the redhead. "Cora," Josie called her. "And you're not the first with papers." Josie stepped to the porch railing and pulled out a worn satchel. She laid out a handful of documents, the edges torn and windblown. "We found these after the last dust storm. Blew through town like Judgment Day. 5 deeds, 5 names, all sold by Frontier Bank, all stamped, all fake. Wade leaned closer. His gut twisted. Same handwriting, same ink, but the properties listed weren't just this ranch. They were scattered across 3 counties. They sold the Brant place 3 times in 1 week, Cora said. Old Henderson Ranch, 5 times since April. Always cash, always hurry. No inspections, Mabel added quietly. And when buyers show up and find someone living there, they think they've been swindled. Not that the bank did the swindling. Wade straightened. So, what happens to those buyers? Josie's eyes darkened. Some leave. Some threaten. Some come back with guns. Mabel's voice was barely a whisper. One of them tried to burn us out. Wade clenched his jaw. This ain't just fraud. No, Josie said. It's a war. And you just rode into the middle of it. A cloud of dust rose on the horizon, tight and fast. Wade turned. You expecting company? Josie followed his gaze, then went pale. That's Morgan Duncan. Rides for the bank. The sisters moved fast. Cora stepped off the porch, hand resting on her revolver. Mabel slipped inside. Wade stayed put. Eyes narrowed as the rider approached. Morgan pulled up hard, his horse lathered with sweat. He didn't dismount. Miss Monroe, he called, tone clipped. Bank manager needs a word. About your overdue taxes. Josie crossed her arms. We don't owe a dime. Morgan's smile was cold. Bank says different. You've got until sundown. Pay the $200 or the land's forfeit. Wade stepped between them, his hand near his belt. Funny. I bought this property 3 days ago. Deed signed by your own bank. Why collect taxes on land you no longer own? Morgan's eyes flicked to Wade's hand, then to the paper he held. He squinted at the signature. Color drained from his face. There's been an error, Morgan muttered. I'll speak to Mr. Preston. Do that, Josie said, stepping forward. She held up her own deed. And ask him how he can sell land we've owned since 1851. Morgan's horse danced nervously under him, sensing the tension. You've known us since we were girls, Mabel said from the doorway. You think we'd squat on someone else's land? Morgan's jaw clenched. I've got my orders. No money by sundown. The sheriff comes with eviction papers. All of you gone, one way or another. He wheeled his horse and rode hard toward town, leaving behind a trail of dust and a threat. Wade stared after him, jaw tight. How much are they claiming you owe? Josie didn't blink. $200. Wade cursed under his breath. And what happens if you pay? Cora answered flatly. Then next month, they ask for more. Until they bleed us dry. Wade paced slowly in the dirt, jaw clenched, eyes on the horizon where Morgan had disappeared. That's nearly half what I paid, he muttered. And I ain't got $1 left, Josie nodded. That's the trap. If we pay, we admit the debt. If we don't, they send the sheriff and take it by force. Cora kicked a stone near the garden fence. And you? What'll you do now, Mr. Cowboy? Wade looked up. Name's Wade Hartwell. I came here to start over. Spent 5 years working cattle and digging ditches to afford this land. I thought I was buying peace. Mabel stepped off the porch, her voice soft. So did we. Wade looked at the house, the garden, the hard-earned life these women had carved from the dust. It wasn't just about land anymore. It was about right and wrong. Look, he said, you don't owe me anything. But if your papers are real, and mine are fake, then we've both been swindled. Question is, what do we do about it? Josie studied him. Most men walk away. I ain't most men, Cora smirked faintly. Mabel asked, even if it means going up against the bank? And the sheriff? Wade nodded. I've faced worse odds for less. What I want now is the truth. And if we can get the town to hear it, maybe we make it harder for them to lie. Josie eyed him. You think the town will care? Maybe not, but they can't ignore proof in daylight. He turned to his horse, pulling the deed from his saddlebag again. You coming? He asked. Josie stepped forward. "Give us 5 minutes to saddle up." The horses moved at a steady trot, hooves kicking up dry dirt as Wade and the Monroe sisters rode side by side. Wade couldn't shake the unease in his gut. He pulled the deed from his coat again, holding it to the sunlight. Something gnawed at him. The ink. It looked aged. But under the light, it shimmered just a little too fresh. "Take a look at this," he said, handing it to Cora. She tilted it, then grunted. This was rushed. "That's not sun-faded ink. It's tinted. And the seal? Pressed too shallow. They made this fast and sloppy." Mabel rode up beside them. "Means they're not just cheating. They're getting careless." "Or desperate," Wade muttered. Josie's eyes narrowed. "Which makes them dangerous." As they crested the final ridge before town, Wade pulled his horse to a halt. Below, the main street lay stretched in dusty silence. Nothing looked out of place, except for the 6 horses tied outside the bank. 6 unfamiliar mounts. Too many for a Tuesday afternoon. Josie cursed under her breath. Too many riders. Too much silence. Cora pointed. "Look at the general store. Closed up. Shutters drawn." Mabel swallowed hard. "No one's walking the street. Even the saloon's dead." Wade scanned the town. "They knew we were coming. They set this up." Down below, the bank door opened. Sheriff Brandt stepped out. 3 men followed, hands low at their sides, gunfighters, not clerks. And then came a 4th figure, a tall man in a fine suit, with a silver watch chain and a cold smile. "That ain't the bank manager," Cora said slowly. "No," Mabel whispered, "but I've seen him before. He met with the bank agent 3 months ago, the one who said we were dead." Wade's voice dropped to a whisper. "They didn't come to negotiate." Josie's grip tightened on her reins. "They came to bury us." Wade's pulse pounded in his ears as the suited man stepped forward, issuing quiet commands to the sheriff and the gunfighters. Like chess pieces on a board, the men began spreading out, some taking cover near barrels, others casually resting hands on holsters. "They're not just here to talk," Wade said, voice flat. "They're planning a crossfire." "We need to fall back," Mabel whispered. "Find another way." "No," Josie said, steel in her voice. "If we run, they hunt us. If we stand, maybe, just maybe, we shine enough light on this to make 'em blink." Wade scanned the side streets. "What about the church trail? You said it snakes up behind town." "Too steep," Cora replied. "Not in daylight. Horses would slip." Wade nodded toward the rocky ridge to the north. "What about that?" But before anyone could answer, Mabel gasped. From the rear trail, 2 more riders appeared, cutting off the ridge. "They've boxed us in," Wade said darkly. "This whole thing, it's a trap." The fine-suited man glanced up at the ridge and pointed directly at them. One of the gunfighters followed his gesture, drawing a spyglass from his vest. "We've been seen," Cora muttered. "They'll come for us now." Josie raised her rifle. "Then let's not wait for the storm to hit us on open ground." Wade turned to her. "You've got something in mind?" She nodded toward the old church below. "There's a mining trail behind it, narrow and rough. But if we make it there, we've got a chance to lose them in the hills." Wade's eyes tracked the route. It was tight, dangerous, but it was the only door left unlocked. "Then we ride," he said. Behind them, the riders on the ridge were already spurring forward. Wade didn't wait for a second vote. "Ride!" he shouted, wheeling his horse downhill. The others followed, hooves thundering, dust curling in their wake like smoke from a prairie fire. The men in town scrambled at the sudden charge. Gunfighters jerked rifles from scabbards. Shouts echoed across the main street, and the sheriff fumbled with his weapon as Wade and the sisters stormed straight toward them. A bullet split the air near Wade's head. "Stay low," he shouted. Josie's rifle cracked, one sharp shot, and a man near the blacksmith's trough spun backward, clutching his shoulder. Her precision sent the others diving for cover. They tore down the center of town, past the mercantile, The shuttered saloon, the banker's lair with its polished windows and wolves behind them. Mabel's horse spooked at a crack from an upstairs window. She nearly fell but held tight, grit in her eyes. There, Josie pointed. The trail's behind the church. They veered hard, galloping past the steeple's shadow. Bullets kicked up dust behind them, but none found flesh. Wade was first to the narrow pass. The trail was barely wider than a wagon axle, weaving up into the rock hills like a snake. No room for flankers, no room for hesitation. They climbed. Behind them, angry voices and hooves gave chase, but the mining path twisted fast, vanished behind boulders and switchbacks. The higher they went, the safer it felt. After 10 grueling minutes, they reached a grove of pine trees clinging to the canyon's edge. Wade called a halt, breathing hard. "Everyone all right?" Cora had a bullet graze along her sleeve. Blood stained the fabric, but she waved it off. Mabel looked shaken but whole. Josie nodded, breath steady. Then Mabel reached into her saddlebag. "I grabbed this," she said quietly, holding out a sealed envelope. Wade took it. It was thick, heavy, wax stamped with the bank's crest. "What is it?" "Their records," she whispered. "The ones they thought they burned." Wade stared at it. "Evidence." Wade broke the wax seal with his thumb, unfolding the packet with careful hands. Inside were ledgers, property maps, and copied deeds, some forged, some original, all bearing the same stamp, Frontier Bank. The papers reeked of sweat and corruption. Josie leaned over his shoulder. "That's the Brant Ranch," she said, pointing. "Sold 3 times in a single month. Different names, same handwriting." Cora winced as she shifted in the saddle, cradling her grazed arm. "They weren't just stealing our land. They've been doing this to everyone." Mabel nodded. "I used to clean for the bank office in town. I saw things I wasn't supposed to. I started copying anything I thought looked strange. Took me months." Wade whistled low. "You've been building a case." "Waiting for someone to listen," Mabel said. Wade folded the documents carefully. "Well, now they've got someone. If we show this to the town, and show them your deed, it'll crack this whole scam wide open. If we live long enough to get there," Cora muttered. "They'll come fast." As if summoned, the distant sound of hoofbeats echoed up the canyon trail. Josie turned sharply. "They found our path." Wade stuffed the envelope into his coat. "We've got a head start, but not much." Mabel looked between them. "We need to split up." "No," Josie said immediately. "Yes," Mabel insisted. "They'll chase the group. I can double back through the old Trapper's Pass. Take the long way around to the mill. I'll be in town by morning." Wade hesitated. "You sure?" Mabel met his gaze. "They're after you and Josie now. They think the records are with you. That's our best shot." Josie's jaw tightened, but she gave a nod. "All right. Ride careful." Mabel turned her mare toward the narrow canyon pass and vanished into the trees. Behind them, the riders were closing fast. Wade looked at the 2 remaining sisters. "We've got one chance to make this count." He patted the envelope under his coat. "And we've got the bullet that'll bring the bank to its knees." Night had fallen by the time Wade, Josie, and Cora reached an old trapper's cabin tucked between 2 dead cottonwoods. The place looked long abandoned, just 4 walls and a rusted stove, but it offered cover and quiet. Inside, the air was musty. Wade lit a lamp low and pulled the bank documents from his coat. Josie tossed her saddle blanket over a wooden crate and sat, her jaw clenched. Cora, pale and sweating from her wound, leaned against the wall. "If we show those papers, they'll come after us harder. You know that, right?" "I'm counting on it," Wade said. "Cornered wolves make mistakes." Josie studied the fire. "You ever go up against people like this before?" Wade hesitated. "I fought in Kansas. Border war. Saw what happens when men put money above lives. This ain't my first time against corruption, but I never plan to do it again." Josie looked at him sideways. "Then why stay?" Wade met her eyes. "Because this ain't about land anymore. It's about them thinking they can decide who gets to live free, And who disappears? The room fell quiet. Outside, an owl called from the trees. Then Josie spoke. When my father died, we had nothing but this land. We've rebuilt it 3 times. Lost everything twice. But we stayed, because this ground is ours. Wade nodded slowly. Then we finish this. He looked at Cora. You ride with Josie back to the ridge tomorrow. I'll head into town and see if I can get someone neutral, maybe Preacher Stokes, to help us call a public meeting. If we show these records in front of everyone, they'll have to listen. Cora chuckled dryly. You think that preacher's got enough spine? Wade grinned. We'll find out. Josie stared at the flames. Tomorrow, we stop running. Outside, the wind shifted. A twig snapped. Wade blew out the lantern and moved to the window, hand on his revolver. Someone was in the woods. Wade squinted through the cabin's dusty window, revolver drawn. The trees swayed in the wind, quiet now, but he didn't relax. Someone was out there, he whispered. Josie stood, rifle in hand. Scouts, maybe. Could be they've tracked us. Or they're waiting for us to ride into the trap, Cora muttered, bandaging her arm in the dark. Wade lowered the curtain. Doesn't change what we have to do. By dawn, the 3 riders split ways. Wade took the high trail, heading for town through the ridge, while Josie and Cora moved south to flank around and enter quietly. The morning sun beat down on the dusty town as Wade approached the rear of the chapel. He led his horse to the back hitch post and stepped inside through a side door. Inside, Preacher Stokes stood at the pulpit, sermon near finished, his voice low and urgent. Wade waited in the back, hat in hand. When the last hymn ended, Wade stepped forward. Preacher, he said quietly, I need a moment of your time, and your pulpit. Stokes blinked. Wade Hartwell, thought you were long gone. I bought a ranch for $1, Wade said dryly. Turns out it came with a war. He showed the preacher a copy of the deeds. The old man's eyes widened. That's real? As real as the lies the bank's been selling. And I've got more in my coat. Stokes hesitated, wringing his hands. The town? They're scared, Wade. So were the Monroe sisters, but they didn't run. Stokes looked out over the pews, where townsfolk were still filing out. If I do this, I can't protect you. I'm not asking for protection, Wade said. Just a voice. Stokes nodded slowly. After the final prayer, I'll call you up. Wade gave a sharp nod and stepped aside. But just then, the chapel doors swung open. Sheriff Brandt stepped in, flanked by Morgan Duncan and 2 deputies. Their eyes swept the room and landed squarely on Wade. Sheriff Brandt walked slow, boots echoing across the chapel floor like thunder on dry land. Morgan Duncan trailed behind, eyes cold, hand never far from his holster. Hartwell, the sheriff said, stopping in the aisle. Didn't expect to find you at Sunday service. Wade stood tall. Didn't expect to find the law working for thieves. A low murmur rippled through the pews. Preacher Stokes stepped forward. Sheriff, we're just concluding service. Perhaps you'd show some respect? Brandt gave a humorless grin. Respect ain't what brought me here. Wade stepped onto the dais and pulled the envelope from his coat. I've got something this town needs to see. Morgan took a step forward. You don't want to do this, Cowboy. Wade ignored him. These papers, he raised his voice for the room to hear, are proof. Forged deeds, multiple buyers. The bank's been running a land scam across this county. Folks you know have lost their homes. You think it's coincidence? He held up one paper, waving it slowly. This here's the Brandt Ranch. Sold 3 times in 1 week. Here's the Henderson place. 5 times. Every one of them marked cash only. No records, no taxes. The townsfolk began murmuring louder now, shifting in their seats. A woman near the front clutched her husband's arm. A shopkeeper whispered a name and pointed toward one of the documents. Brandt turned to Morgan. He's bluffing. Morgan didn't answer. Josie Monroe's voice rang out from the back of the church. No, he's not. She stepped into the aisle, rifle slung, eyes locked on the sheriff. Cora followed, bandaged but steady. "We've lived this nightmare for 3 years," Josie said. "They tried to erase us, told people we were dead, but we're standing here now." Wade laid the documents on the altar. "The truth is right here. Read it for yourselves." Suddenly, the chapel door banged open again, and the bank manager himself stormed in, eyes wild, face red. "You hand over those papers," he shouted, striding forward. "That's private property." Wade turned. "So's the land you've been stealing." The manager's hand went to his coat, his pistol gleaming as it cleared leather. A gunshot rang out, echoing through the church rafters. The bank manager froze, clutching his shoulder. Josie lowered her rifle. "I warned you once." The church fell into stunned silence, smoke still curling from Josie's rifle barrel. The bank manager staggered backward, blood soaking his fine coat. Not fatal, but enough to humble him. Morgan reached for his gun, but Wade had already drawn his. "Don't," Wade said coldly. "I ain't as patient as she is." Morgan froze. Preacher Stokes stepped forward, voice steady. "This is the Lord's house. If you're here to settle accounts, let's do it in truth." Wade placed the full stack of documents on the altar. Every one of these shows a pattern: sales made in secret, multiple owners for the same land, taxes invented out of thin air. The Monroe sisters were just one example. There are dozens more. Murmurs grew louder. Townsfolk moved closer, eyes scanning the names, their neighbors, their kin, some their own. From the back of the room came a new voice, strong and crisp. "I believe those documents belong in federal hands." All heads turned. A man stepped through the chapel doors, wearing a badge gleaming silver bright. "Marshal Thad Gannon," he announced. "Territorial Office of Land Claims. We've had our eyes on Frontier Bank for a while, but we needed proof. Looks like you just gave it to us." The sheriff turned pale. You got no jurisdiction here." Gannon raised a thick packet. "Actually, I do. Arrest warrants for Morgan Duncan, Sheriff Brandt, and Preston Nash, senior manager of Frontier Bank." The bank manager's knees gave out. Morgan tried to bolt, but Josie's rifle snapped up again. "Don't even think about it." Gannon's deputies entered behind him, collecting weapons, snapping irons around wrists. The sheriff didn't resist. Morgan spat on the floor but followed quietly. As they were led out, the crowd parted, silent, watching the lie unravel in front of them. Josie turned to Wade. "You did it." Wade shook his head. "We did." Gannon stepped forward. "You 3 girls, you're owed more than land. There'll be hearings, compensation, maybe even justice." Cora smiled bitterly. "We'll believe that when we see it." But Wade's eyes were on the door. Trouble wasn't done yet. He knew it in his bones. The next 2 days passed in a blur of signatures, statements, and shocked town meetings. The marshals set up a temporary office in the old schoolhouse, and people streamed in with old deeds, suspicious letters, and stories that matched what the Monroe sisters had lived through for years. Frontier Bank's offices were sealed shut, the windows boarded. Preston Nash and Sheriff Brandt were shackled and carted off under armed guard. Morgan Duncan never said a word. By the 3rd morning, the entire town had changed. There was a buzz in the saloon, folks speaking in low tones about lawsuits, reparations, land restored. And through it all, Wade stayed by the sisters, sighed. That afternoon, as the dust settled on Main Street, Marshal Gannon approached him with a letter. "It's official," he said. "Your deed's null and void." Wade took it without blinking. "I figured. But the Monroe deed is ironclad. Land's rightfully theirs. You're free to go." Wade nodded. "Thanks, Marshal." But Josie stepped forward. "He's not going." Wade looked at her, surprised. "You fought for this land like it was your own," she said. "You nearly died for it. You could have walked away." Cora crossed her arms. "We figure you've earned a place here, if you want it." Mabel handed him a paper. "We had the lawyer draw this up. Monroe Ranch, now with a fourth name on the deed. Wade stared at it. His name, written in ink. A silence passed between them. Then a slow smile crept across his face. But before he could answer, a boy sprinted down the road breathless. "Riders!" he shouted. "5 of 'em! Coming fast from the south!" Wade's smile vanished. Josie grabbed her rifle. "Harper?" she asked. "Could be," Gannon muttered. "Could be worse." The street cleared as distant dust rose beyond the bluffs. Men with long rifles. Professional riders. Not lawmen. Guns for hire. "Guess the folks behind the bank just got the news," Wade said grimly. "And they're not sending lawyers." The riders crested the ridge at full gallop. 5 men, hard-faced, black coats flapping behind them like crows. No badges, just purpose, just guns. Wade stood in the center of Main Street, his coat open, hand resting near his Colt. Josie was to his left, rifle steady. Cora crouched atop the saloon awning with a long-range repeater. Mabel, calm as ever, moved between buildings, guiding townsfolk to safety. Marshal Gannon stood beside Wade. "You sure you want to stand your ground?" "This ain't just about land anymore," Wade said. "It's about making sure no one ever tries this again." The lead rider slowed to a trot, his horse snorting as it stepped onto the sun-baked street. He wore no hat. His hair was silver and long, his eyes sharp. A killer's gaze. "I'm here for what was stolen," the man said. "You're too late," Wade replied. "The bank's gone, the truth's out, and we've got nothing left worth dying for except each other." The silver-haired man dismounted slowly, then die for that. He drew first, but not fast enough. Wade's Colt roared. The shot clipped the man's shoulder, spinning him backward. Before the others could react, Josie's rifle cracked twice, dropping one rider from his saddle. From the rooftops, Cora's repeater rang out, metal precision striking true. Chaos exploded. The remaining riders scattered, returning fire. Bullets thudded into storefronts, splintering wood. One horse screamed and fled. Wade moved forward, taking cover behind a wagon wheel, exchanging fire with a man who ducked behind the blacksmith's shop. Mabel reappeared in the street, tossing Wade a fresh box of shells with perfect timing. In under 2 minutes it was done. 2 men dead. One wounded and limping toward the edge of town. The last turned tail and galloped off into the hills. The silver-haired leader groaned in the dust, clutching his side. Wade stood over him. "Who sent you?" The man spat blood. "You already know. They're rich, powerful, and they ain't done." Wade holstered his weapon. "Neither are we." Josie stepped beside him, the barrel of her rifle still hot. "You tell whoever owns you. We're not scared anymore." Gannon nodded. This town just became the worst place in the territory to do dirty business. As the sun dipped low and the townsfolk began to emerge, Wade looked to the 3 sisters. Their land was safe, their names cleared. But more than that, they weren't alone anymore. Mabel smiled softly. "Looks like you bought a ranch for $1, Josie added, "and found something worth staying for." Wade grinned. "Yeah, reckon I did."